The listening section has 3 parts. Part 1. For short conversations, each followed by 1 question. Part 2. 1 longer conversation, followed by 4 questions. Part 3. 1 lecture, followed by 6 questions. You will hear each conversation or lecture only 1 time. You must answer each question before continuing. To continue to the next question, click the Next button. In this section, you cannot use the back button to return to an earlier question. The number of questions and the amount of time you have to answer the questions will be shown separately for each section in the Question Time Left window on your screen. Time is not counted while you are listening to the conversation or lecture. Listening Part 1.
Question 1.
Could you okay this request for me?
Sure. May I use your pen?
What does the man need to do?
Question 2.
The bookstore has run out of the textbook of Dr. Martin's class.
They didn't expect so many students to take his class this semester.
What do we learn about this situation?
Question 3.
Will you accept a collect call from Lisa?
Yes, I will.
What does the man mean?
Question 4.
That restaurant really serves good food.
Let me know next time you go. I'll join you.
What does the woman mean?
Listening Part 2. Listen to a conversation between a professor and a student, Carla.
Everything all right, Carla?
Yes, I just wanted to talk to you about the assignment that's due on Monday.
I can't give you an extension if that's what you want.
No, it's not that. I wanted to ask you about the word limit. At the moment, I'm way over it, but I found so many useful sources that I don't really want to cut anything out.
Well, it's meant as a guide rather than a hard and fast rule. It's not as if I'll stop marking as soon as I reach the word limit. But I don't really want you to go way over it either. 2,800 is the absolute maximum, I'd say.
Wow, that's still going to be hard.
Well, you can use this opportunity to try to make your writing more succinct. It's good exercise in writing technique. Think about which of the writer's points you really want to draw attention to, and discard any information that isn't really relevant to your premise.
Okay, I'll try that.
Remember, you can always refer to 2 or more sources in the same paragraph, in the same sentence even.
What do you mean?
If one of your citations seems to complement what the other says, you can refer to them at the same time. You can do that when they contradict each other, too. It's a perfectly acceptable way of constructing a paragraph.
I get you. Well, I'd better go. I've got a lot to do before Monday.
Hang on, Carla. while you're here, I wanted to mention something to you.
What's that?
Have you heard about the Harvey Graduate Business Program?
No?
It's a special scheme funded by the Harvey Group, the financial place in town.
Yeah, I know it.
Well, they have a special program that they run especially for graduates. It's very exclusive. They only take on 3 people a year. Each of the major colleges in the state is invited to put forward a maximum of 5 students a year for consideration. And we only pick out the very best students, the ones with really high grades. I wondered if you'd be interested in trying out for it. After all, you've been doing well in all your modules.
Wow, it sounds like an honor to be considered. I guess all those late nights working on assignments were worth it. What does the program give you?
Well, you get work and training at the Harvard Group for a year, and then they will fund your master's course a year down the line. I'm right that you're interested in doing a master's course, aren't I?
Yes, I was considering doing something management-based.
Well, I think they discuss with you what master's course would be best for you and them, depending on the department you're working on. So you may be obliged to do the course they want you to do, but it's bound to be useful. Then they employ you for another year. And after that, you can choose to stay with the company or move on somewhere else.
Harvey's a prestigious company. I couldn't see myself moving on fast if I managed to get my foot in the door.
Indeed. Well, is it something that might appeal to you?
Maybe. I was hoping to go abroad for a while, though. What do I have to do to apply? Do I need a resume? I was working on mine just the other night.
Well, there's a rather lengthy application form to fill out, so I don't think a resume is needed. Then, if you get through the first stage, you'll have to do a presentation. If they like you, they'll invite you back for an interview. It's pretty tough, as you can imagine, but I wouldn't suggest it to you if I didn't think you could do it. I mean, you've done some great presentations in class, and you've had the experience of setting up your own business, too.
No. I haven't done that.
Haven't you? I thought you did something selling perfumes.
That's Miranda.
Oh, is it? Well, sorry about that. My mistake. But you've still had experience working in a business, haven't you?
Yeah, I've worked in my dad's office in the vacations.
Well, that's very valuable, and I'm sure you learned a lot from that. Well, if you're interested in the program, come to my office later on, and I'll give you the details. After 4 is best for me.
Thanks.
Question 1. Carla wants to talk to the professor because... Question 2. What does the professor advise Carla to do? Question 3. The Harvey Graduate Business Program provides young people with... Question 4. Which one of these does Carla not need to do? Listening Part 3.
Listen to part of a lecture in an animal behavior class.
Okay, well, last time we talked about passive habitat selection, like plants, for example. They don't make active choices about where to grow. They're dispersed by some other agent, like the wind. And if the seeds land in a suitable habitat, they do well and reproduce. With active habitat selection, an organism is able to physically select where to live and breed. And because an animal's breeding habitat is so important, we'd expect animal species to have developed preferences for particular types of habitats, places where their offspring have the best chance of survival. So let's look at the effect these preferences can have by looking at some examples. But first, let's recap. What do we mean by habitat? Frank?
Well, it's basically the place or environment where an organism normally lives and grows.
Right. And as we've discussed, there's some key elements that a habitat must contain. Food, obviously, water, and it's got to have the right climate, and spaces for physical protection. And we saw how important habitat selection is when we looked at habitats where some of these factors are removed, perhaps through habitat destruction. I just read about a shorebird, the plover. The plover lives by the ocean and feeds on small shellfish, insects, and plants. It blends in with the sand, so it's well camouflaged from predator birds above. But it lays its eggs in shallow depressions in the sand with very little protection around them. So if there are people or dogs on the beach, the eggs and fledglings in the nests are really vulnerable. Out in California, where there's been a lot of human development by the ocean, the plovers are now a threatened species. So conservationists tried to create a new habitat for them. They made artificial beaches and sandbars in areas inaccessible to people and dogs. And the plover population is up quite a bit in those places. Okay, that's an instance where a habitat is made less suitable. But now, what about cases where an animal exhibits a clear choice between two suitable habitats? In cases like that, does the preference matter? Well, let's look at the blue warbler. The blue warbler is a songbird that lives in North America. They clearly prefer hardwood forests with dense shrubs, bushes, underneath the trees. They actually nest in the shrubs, not the trees, so they're pretty close to the ground, but these warblers also nest in forests that have low shrub density. It's usually the younger warblers that nest in these areas because the preferred spots where there are a lot of shrubs are taken by the older, more dominant birds. And the choice of habitat seems to affect reproductive success, because the older, more experienced birds who nest in the high-density shrub areas have significantly more offspring than those in low-density areas, which suggests that the choice of where to nest does have an impact on the number of chicks they have. But a preferred environment doesn't always seem to correlate with greater reproductive success. For example, in Europe, studies have been done of blackcap warblers. We just call them blackcaps. The blackcap can be found in two different environments. Their preferred habitat is forests near the edges of streams. However, blackcaps also live in pine woods away from water. Studies have been done on the reproductive success rates for the birds in both areas, and the results showed, surprisingly, that the reproductive success was essentially the same in both areas, the preferred and the second-choice habitat. Well, why? It turned out that there were actually 4 times as many bird pairs or couples living in the stream edge habitat compared to the area away from the stream. So the stream edge area had a much denser population, which meant more members of the same species competing for resources, wanting to feed on the same things or build their nests in the same places, which lowered the suitability of the prime habitat even though it's their preferred habitat. So the results of the study suggest that when the number of competitors in the prime habitat reaches a certain point, the second-ranked habitat becomes just as successful as the prime habitat, just because there are fewer members of the same species living there. So it looks like competition for resources is another important factor in determining if a particular habitat is suitable.
Question 1. What is the lecture mainly about? Question 2. What is the main purpose of the lecture? Question 3. What element of the plover's habitat in California was threatened? Question 4. What does the professor illustrate with the example of the blue warbler? Question 5. Why does the professor mention the population density of blackcaps in two different habitats? Question 6. According to the professor, why did some blackcaps choose a secondary habitat?